Hello, and welcome to the Science Fiction and Fantasy Marketing Podcast, the show where we help you establish your author brand, increase the size of your audience, and sell more books. I'm Lindsay Baroker, and I'm here with my co-hosts.
I'm Jeff Poole. And I'm Joe Lalo.
And we've got a cool guest for you this week, or geeky, as she was saying before the show, but those are cool on our show. Miranda Honfleur. She is a born and raised Chicagoan living in Indianapolis and partaking in all things geek. She grew up on a fantasy and sci-fi novels, spending nearly as much time in Valdemar, Pern, Tortau, Narnia, and Middle-earth as in reality. Now she writes speculative fiction starring fierce heroines and daring heroes who make difficult choices along their great adventures and dark intrigues, all with a generous dose or overdose of romance. And the reason we're bringing her on the show, not that all those things aren't great, is that her series has been selling quite well since she released it, the first book in November, in kind of the epic fantasy category. And we're going to ask her what she's been doing. And she's also, do you have 3 books out now, or is the 4th one, it's on its way, right?
Yeah, I have 3 books out in my series, and I have 1 book out in a multi-author box set, and then book 4 is coming in August. So.
All right, cool. Well, why don't you start out telling us a little bit about your publishing journey and what made you choose self-publishing? I'm already flubbing for Jeff's listener.
Oh, that's okay. I'll be flubbing a lot too, no doubt. That's my MO. But let's see, I've been a hobbyist writer since probably junior high. I think it just went hand in hand with reading a ton of books and kind of running out of heroines and fantasy, at least young adult level. So I just started making up my own. I went on a different route career-wise. I went to law school and got my MBA. So I was tracked into that. Unfortunately, it did not work out for me. I was not cut out for that job. Less people who do that, but it's not for me. My husband saw just how depressed I was with it, and he was student teaching at the time, and his class was doing NaNoWriMo, and he's like, why don't you do this? Like, you love writing, it's your hobby. Go ahead and try it out. And so I gave it a shot, and that was in 2013. And 4 years later, I had 2 books ready and a bunch planned, and I guess that's mostly it.
Well, I think writing fantasy is probably more fun than lawyering or businessing. I don't know, but
less depressing, little fewer issues and stress to take on from everybody. So
you must not be doing the grim dark stuff where everybody dies by the end of the series.
Just a little. I'm sure my readers would say I torture them, but definitely not with like mangled bodies and actual torture. So.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned in the intro, your stories are in the epic fantasy category, among some other spots, and they're pretty hefty books, looking about 700 plus pages. Yeah. But you've also mentioned that the romance plays a pivotal role. Could you talk a little bit about expectations of the genre and whether you were worried about balancing things?
So there was a little bit of a question in my mind before I actually published whether I should put them in romance or epic fantasy, because I consider them cross-genre, like they're just mashed up together. And I knew I wasn't going to follow the romance conventions, so to be safe, I put them in fantasy, and I think that worked out because there's no expectation there. So there's no like, oh, well, there's definitely an HEA, or there's definitely no cheating, or like, you know, these specific things have to happen in this order. So I'm glad I went there because that gives me more freedom. But that said, yeah, there's a lot of romance. I'm one of those readers where I'll be reading a doorstopper fantasy novel, and the most exciting part to me is like, will they or won't they? And I don't think I'm alone in that. A lot of my friends were the same way, and online groups and so on. So it was near and dear to my heart, and that's what I ended up writing, not really knowing how many people out there were going to buy it. And as it turned out, it worked out.
As it would, you know, romance is one of those things where it defines an entire genre, but it's usually present in every other genre. Like mystery is another one. Like as an author, like obviously when you constructed your story, you had in mind that you wanted that to be in it because it's what you look for in the books that you read. As an author constructs their story, do you think they should be watching for elements like that, like sort of universal, usually in a story elements, and making a conscious effort to include them?
I do think if you include what you're passionate about, that'll show in your writing. Um, as far as I think of these elements as a right to market sort of theory, and it's something I would have loved to have done, but I had my books already written. But if you can pick out what your target audience really loves, you look at the books that they read and the books that they 5-star and see what they say in their reviews. What did they love about them? If you could include those things in your books, then I think that's part of the recipe for success.
If you had a book already written and it was written to your taste because maybe you didn't even intend to market it initially, and then you go through the checklist and you realize there's a big piece missing, you think it's the sort of thing you go back and try to comb it in, or is it just, well, the next book will have that stuff?
Well, I find it really difficult to make a decision like that by myself. So I'll generally give it to my critique partners. I'm part of this really awesome group of writers and I trust them wholeheartedly. So I'd turn it over to them and be like, guys, what do you think? Is this going too far? Is this going to work? And if we don't really have a consensus, I would go to beta readers for that.
First, I got to tell you, I loved it when you were asked the question, like, how many books do you have out now? You know you're a successful reader or author when you go like, I have, and then you got to think about it. So you can't just go, oh, no, I've got a book out. No, you have to like, I have, well, this one's out there. This one's not quite out yet. So since epic fantasy authors tend to be a wee bit long-winded, myself included, I wanted to ask you about your writing style. Are you someone who follows an outline?
Actually, yes. I need a meticulous outline. I need scene maps. I have my entire series outlined. I can't work without it. But that said, once I get to the writing part, sometimes the characters will be like, I'm not doing that. And then you kind of have to scrap your outline for that part and figure out what they are going to do.
Yeah, that was the second part of my question is like, how well do you follow said outline?
Yeah, sometimes I will have in mind, like, this is what's going to happen. But then the actual characters get there and they just are not having it. So you kind of got to follow their lead.
So how far in advance do you plan out your story arcs?
Well, I have the 6-book series fully planned out. So I'm getting to book 4, releasing in August. So yeah, I like to have the entire series planned out so I know the destination and that way I can lay the groundwork as I go. I just feel like if I weren't going to plan so far in advance, I would have trouble not backtracking and fixing things and adding things in later, which is kind of hard when the books are already out. So
yeah, we're going to ask you pretty soon how you've been marketing them. But first, I'm curious, as listeners do not know, most of them, we actually met at the Sell More Books conference, which we talked about on the show last week. And I'm curious, what were you looking for? Like, was it worth going as a newer author? And did you learn any cool stuff that other people might be interested in knowing about?
Well, if law school and business school encouraged me in any way, it was to learn everything I can. And I'm the kind of person that I will bury myself in books and I will try to glean every bit of useful information out of them that I can. And I'm the same way when it comes to courses and summits and conferences. I don't feel like I know so much that I can't learn anything. So I did take away quite a bit of useful information. And of course, there's a networking aspect and learning everyone's different journeys and sort of what they're doing. And it kind of helps because you just kind of have your own personal experience to go on, but you can take little things from other people and their insights and kind of apply that to your own career.
Yeah, I know you got to meet up with Kitty K.M. Shea, too,
Yeah.
who we've had on the show. And I guess you'd worked together on a box set. Do you want to tell us, or was that not her? Fairy Tales?
No, we didn't work together on the box set. But
who'd you work with?
I worked with Ryan Murray, Catherine Bennett, Emerald Dodge, and Emily Allen West. And those are all wonderful writers who are in my writer group. And we actually just kind of party crashed the fairy tale genre. So we decided, you know what? We want to write fairy tales. That's exactly what we did. So yeah, we got to kind of pull up next to Kitty and be like, hey.
Yeah, I guess she's my one person I know that writes fairy tales, so I just assumed she was involved. But since that's a little different than your main epic fantasy series, what made you decide to go in that direction?
Well, I believe in something called series adjacent genres. I think that with every series, you can kind of find elements in it that aren't specifically part of the genre you put it in. So I already have that with the cross-genre epic fantasy romance. But I also have elements in it that are kind of like paranormal romance or sword and sorcery or fairy tale. I think fairy tale kind of lends itself to like coming close to my series as it is. So I think if you write fairy tale fantasy, you can love elements from that and then love elements hopefully from my series. And each of us were able to find something in fairy tale that we could replicate in our own series that readers of both books could enjoy.
Excellent. I was actually going to ask a marketing thing, but marketing comes later, so ask this instead. Like, obviously, you knew that you were a big fan of epic fantasy, or reader of epic fantasy, and you like romantic elements. When like and fairy tales are adjacent. So, how do you know beforehand that you're going to be able to write something? Do you have to try it first? Do you just feel like, yeah, all the elements are there, I'm going to be able to do that?
Well, I like to research. Again, that's just my thing. I don't like to jump in just without knowing what I'm doing. So I read up on fairy tale books. I looked at the like top 25 and picked out some of those. I went back and found every different version of Beauty and the Beast that I could find, because that's the one we were doing. So I reread all of those. And I wanted to make sure that I got the elements right. And that said, these aren't like what 100% exact retellings of the fairy tale, but they're all inspired by. So we were all able to glean certain elements because we'd done the research.
Now, and when you do like deep research like that, I don't know how often you've done it, but do you ever find that, like, you know what, on second thought, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pull this off? Like, would you ever sort of back away and take a different direction?
I haven't written enough books yet, or I haven't attempted enough books yet to really say for that. But I do know for certain elements of things in my books, like I decide, oh, I'm going to write this sword fight and I'm going to use all the proper terminology. And then I go dive deep into HEMA stuff and historical sword fighting manuals and so on. And I'm just like, no, like I cannot pull this off.
My brother tried to write a novel, and his decision from the beginning was, I'm going to write sword fights realistically. And he got to his first sword fight, and he did the research. He was like, I don't think I'm going to write a novel. He just gave up on the entire book because it would be too difficult to do that.
Yeah, it can be discouraging.
Yeah.
That's what happens when you have it muted again.
Oh,
Me and
no.
my mute button, I tell you. Okay, I wanted to know about your ideal working environment. Do you have any possibility for distractions? Do you have to work in a clean room, no electronics, no nothing? Do you follow a set number of hours per writing day, or do you have set yourself a word count? What do you have to do?
Well, before it was almost, I could work anywhere as long as I was typing and had my headphones. But okay, so a little bit of a tangent, but I actually messed up my wrists really bad when I was working on my third book. And I had to do like 2 months of physical therapy and get shots directly into my wrist and things like that. So
Ouch.
yeah, it's kind of a wake-up call that I can't just do whatever to my body and expect it to be okay. I'm not invincible. So I had to switch to dictation. And I know some people struggle with it because it can have a little bit of a steep learning curve, but when you don't have any other choice, you kind of just learn it.
How well did it work for you? Because I say I'm also a computer tech. I set that stuff up for a lot of people there, and barely anybody wants to take the time to try and read the page after page after page so the computer learns how you talk. But if not, then you've got to have a good sense of humor, because the computer is just guessing what you're talking about.
Yeah, well, it definitely took some patience. But once I got it working for me, I loved it. It increased my productivity. I could do it comfortably. I didn't have to worry about getting hurt. I could do it on the go if I wanted to. And the productivity, that was a real bonus. Because before, I'd say maybe my max word count per day would be 2,000 to 3,000. Maybe on like a crazy day, I could get like 8 or 10. But crazy days were few and far between, and then you kind of pay for it with brain drain after that. But with dictation, I would say between 4 and 10K is totally doable. I do need for it to be quiet, and my husband, if he's around, I just cannot dictate. I don't care if we have like the door closed and he's in the other room with headphones and there's just no way he can hear me. Nope, can't do it. I just feel like I'm on stage and won't work. So it has to be while he's at work.
Now, do you have to go back and edit any of that? Because like for instance, like, okay, new paragraph, quote, Tom did this there in comma, end quote this. I mean, do you have to say all that?
Yeah, you do. You have to say all the punctuation, you have to say all the formatting. That part I got down, but as it happens with fantasy, sometimes your funky words don't quite come out right. So yeah, those will sometimes end up being problematic. Like I'll have to just use a different word instead of that word, and then just do like
that is definitely the problem with fantasy writers there, because I've got a few of my own made-up words, and I've had people tell me that they've had their little Kindle devices read the book to them, like an audiobook, so to speak, and it gets to that part, and they know how to say the words I've spelled it, but the Kindle is like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh well.
Yeah, exactly that.
Yeah, when I used it back in the day, I remember having trouble, even with training it, how to say like a made-up fantasy word. It was still iffy on whether I would get it, but this was like 15 years ago, so I'm hoping things are better now for for dictation.
Yeah, definitely. I know the Mac version was getting some bad reviews maybe a year or two ago, but the newer version that I got this year, I love it.
That's good. It's better to be injured now than it was 15 years ago, because that was my problem too. I had RSI and I couldn't type. Anyway, let's move on to the fun stuff, the marketing stuff. Can you talk about what your launch of your first book was like?
Oh, I can talk about launch all day, so you'll just have to stop me. But my plan came from what I read up on the Liliana Nirvana method, which was kind of just throw out like 5 books at once and be like, boom, I'm here, I've made an impact. Unfortunately for me, at like 200K per book, that was going to be a long time. So I decided to proceed with 2 books and a pre-order, a 3-month pre-order. And I started about 5 months early on InstaFreebie and BookFunnel with a reader magnet because I knew nobody was going to know who I was. So if I just launched, how was that going to succeed? So I worked on getting a platform. By the time I did launch, I had about 4,000 subscribers. So, and I'd put out the reader magnet, I'd put out a preview of book 1. I had done some list builders. I did my own King Sumo giveaway with comp titles. And I did a 10-day pre-order with Facebook ads after a video I watched from Chris Fox. And unfortunately, I was not confident enough to just go ads only. I had only started learning how to manage Facebook ads and AMS, and it was just a lot of information all at once. So I ended up going with a lot of launch promos like Bargain Booksy and Fussy Librarian, and those. I used Ram's Promo Stacker because I couldn't even imagine handling all of those at once, and he did that for me, which I'm forever grateful.
Okay, let me ask you a couple questions there.
Okay.
First, the most recent thing, how did you get like Bargain Booksy and those guys as a new author without any reviews on any other stuff? I know a lot of them ask for that.
Well, what I did was I put the paperback up early, and then I got ARC readers from my list and Hidden Gems, and they ended up posting reviews. So I had a few before everything was finalized. So luckily I made it.
All right, yeah, that's a good strategy.
Yeah.
And you mentioned Reader Magnet, which people can probably guess kind of that's designed to get people onto your list. But what did you use that then excited them to try the series and get on your list?
Well, I wanted a reader magnet that would accomplish 2 objectives. And one was obviously to get people to read book 1, but I also wanted to use it at the back of the book of book 1 so that readers would be like, oh, hey, this interests me. I definitely want to sign up to get this. So I used a prequel short story that had a scene in it where the love interests first meet. So I figured that would satisfy both.
And you mentioned something about comp titles, and what was that all about that you were doing?
Okay, so I mentioned that I didn't really write the book to market, but I was determined to launch it to market. And part of that involved finding out what my target audience likes to read and whether those books are similar to mine. So I did a lot of research and found a couple of titles that I thought were similar to mine. And I ended up giving those away at a King Sumo giveaway. So I figured if I'm trying to encourage the audience of this particular book to read my book, then I should offer them more of those books that they like.
That's definitely a good policy. I want to say that you started off, before release, you had 4,000 people on your list.
Yeah.
It took me a number of years to get to 4,000 people, so excellent work.
Well, I think I lucked out on the Insta Freebie and book funnel craze, so.
That's true. And so you got started with Insta Freebie. Are you still using Insta Freebie to build your list?
I still do some group giveaways from time to time. I definitely did several this past month and this month. But I'm sort of more focusing on book funnel now.
Right. And so when you get started with, well, I should say, do you feel you have any feel for the different quality of subscribers that you get from the different methods? Like, I know that I used Insta Freebie for a while, and it increased my count, but it didn't really increase my engagement much.
Mm-hmm. Well, I am a big data person, so I segment my list based on every origin that I have. So I like to compare open rates and clicks and everything. And I did find that with the Insta Freebie and BookFunnel subscribers, they were actually pretty engaged. So most of them just unsubscribed if they weren't going to open or click anything. And the ones that stayed, I did my best to try to engage them. So a lot of that meant including free books. So they signed up because free book. So I wanted to give them free books. So that's what a lot of my swaps were early on, were just free books that were in the same genre as me. And I kind of tried to keep them happy, and in the meantime sort of persuade them a little, like, here's who I am, here's what I write, here's a little quiz and some little goodies. And luckily enough of them stayed.
That's excellent. You know, it's an excellent point. We talk about a lot on the show. If you build a list with giveaways, sometimes you'll get people who just want free stuff. This might be the first time I've heard someone say, if people want free stuff, well then, gosh darn it, I'm going to give them free stuff. It's one way or another, you end up with a fan.
Yeah, and people who like free stuff, they're not, worthless subscribers. So they might not buy your book, but they might happily read an ARC, leave a review, tell other people about your books.
So my question to you would be, have you ever felt it necessary to cull your subscriber list? Have you ever had to reduce them down for anything? I mean, you're just talking about the different types of subscribers you get. Is there any that you value more than others?
Oh, that's a tough one. I would say that the ones that sign up from the front or back of my books tend to be the most engaged. Yeah, they're the most engaged. So I would say those are probably the highest quality subscribers that I get. But as for culling my list, yes, I definitely have culled my list. I don't want to hang on to dead weight. I know there are people who will say, well, you never know, someday they, might open your mail or they might click on something, but that really adds up. So I had close to a 15K list, and about, 5,000 to 6,000 of them just weren't really active.
Dead
and
weight.
and I don't mean like not clicking. I mean like not even opening. So,
right.
So I kind of sent them like do you still want to be on this list? Like in case you're using Outlook and reading through the previewer, whatever, click on something so I know you want to be here. So I managed to get like, I don't know, a couple out of every 100 with that, and then everyone else gone.
Okay, I'm going to backtrack a little bit because I thought when you mentioned King Sumo giveaway that may be garbly-gook to some listeners. So is this is a WordPress plugin, right? Isn't something you did all by yourself, or was this like a group thing with other authors?
Well, I've done 2 so far. The first one I did was by myself. I actually I was watching Derek Murphy's videos, and he mentioned all these different giveaway apps you could use, like King Sumo, Rafflecopter, Gleam. And I thought, this is genius. I want to do this. So not only do I get to give stuff away, but people who like the stuff I'm giving away will see my books. So King Sumo was an expensive option, but I think I got it like on sale. They have a new version out right now that like you don't have to use on WordPress. You could use on their site. So you have a couple more options with what you can do. But I definitely think it was a worthwhile purchase.
And did you give something to everybody that entered, like your reader magnet, or was it just entering a giveaway to maybe possibly win a paperback or whatever you did?
That would have been smart, and I will write that down for next time. But no, it was just the, win this package of stuff.
Okay, and did you then put those people that entered under your email list?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I made sure to be like, enter my mailing list to, have a possibility of winning, blah, blah, blah. So.
Did you ever try the Amazon giveaway program? I don't think they can require email address, but I think they can do like a Facebook like or Twitter follow or something like that.
I did do those just sort of because I wanted to give stuff to my mailing list. So I did, I don't know, maybe half a dozen to a dozen Amazon giveaways in exchange for Amazon follows. And yeah, just gave it to my subscribers because, hey, you're here, enter to win a book.
Yeah, it is nice now that Amazon actually emails people that follow you. There was a while where they had that feature, and I followed myself to see if it would come out. And, if it came out, it would be like 6 months after the release. And you're like, oh, good to know that's out now.
Not timely.
Well, that was a little bit about the launch. So what I'm curious about, I won't say it's easy to launch well, but some people succeed at it. So the hard part is to keep your book selling. So, I've seen that you've stuck around the epic fantasy category. What have you been doing to keep things rolling?
Well, I try to make sure to have something coming out every 3 months at least. So I feel like as an indie, it's hard to fathom what can happen falling off the cliff because you just don't have this huge marketing push behind you. But that said, I've seen some people do really well with just ads, but that's what I do. I keep ads up at all times. I use AMS, Facebook ads, and BookBub ads. Just whichever one is getting me the best CPC, that's the winner for those particular keywords. I also participate in promos. I am a huge fan of promos. Recently, our writers group did some self-hosted promos on our websites, and those worked out really well. Other authors are doing them too, so I joined those. And I feel like that's both a great strategy for keeping your books alive, but also getting the right also bots because you're joining your genre promo, or you're joining an author's promo whose also bots you want to be in. And so hopefully you're kind of concentrating your also bots and getting those readers where you need them.
So you have then found that all of those ad platforms, BookBub, Facebook, Amazon, have been effective for you, or you've just tinkered so much you've managed to make it work in the grand scheme there?
Oh, I have tinkered a lot. I'm not sure how many ads people tend to make on, like, say, BookBub, but in the past 6 months or so, I think I've made 200 to 300 BookBub ads. I like to test each individual target or keyword, and then I just keep the ones that have a good CPC and a good CTR, and I just kill the rest of them.
I've certainly found that it's really easy to spend a lot of money, especially on BookBub. So do you have any tips for people that want to get the clicks and get the purchases, but don't have thousands of dollars to spend?
Ooh, well, I would say at least what I've been doing is comparing CPC across all platforms. So if BookBub is going to charge me twice as much as AMS, I'm just gonna stick with AMS because I'm all in with KDP Select. So a click is a click is a click. But also I would say really test your graphics. So what I did was I got 5 graphics for the same book from Catzilla Designs, and I tested all of them. Like I had a bunch of keywords, and for each keyword, I tested all 5 graphics until I found the one that was working the best. So I think there's some fine tuning involved if you really want to get those good CPCs and CTRs.
Yeah, I've definitely found that when I've used them. I've only done it for like the release week or two, since for me, it was pretty expensive. And I felt like the Amazon ads converted better, at least for my recent fantasy series. But I only did like 6, so obviously I'm a loser.
No.
But I did different graphics and different text, like, whatever you can say, free and Kindle Unlimited, to kind of attract different people. And yeah, I agree that that's one thing to do, is just kind of watch which ones aren't performing up to expectations, because it gets really expensive if they're not getting clicked that much, which doesn't seem like that should be true, but it gets expensive in the cost per click.
Yeah, I feel like it requires more babysitting than AMS or Facebook, because at least as far as I know, there's no way to just be like, here's the total budget you can spend from me. Don't spend more than this. It's kind of just like individual per ad.
Yeah, with Amazon, they can like take forever to spend $25, and on BookBub, you can like approve another day, another $50, and it's gone the next time you reload the page.
Yeah.
As far as Amazon ads goes, everybody we've talked to that's being successful with them is going in pretty much every week and doing like new ads or killing the old ones, making sure things haven't fallen off too much. Is that what you're doing?
I do add new keywords, so I'm continuously adding keywords. I try to do something like, I don't know, 10 a week. And I do pay attention to the numbers, but I don't know, like I generally am in favor of letting it ride and just seeing what happens, because sometimes some of those metrics are tricky. Like we heard at the summit, right? You don't want to pay attention to the sales or ACOS. You want to be looking at the clicks. So I might have a ton of clicks on an ad and it might say no sales, but then if I turn it off, I see the sales drop on my dashboard. So yeah, I'm not sure it's that reliable. It's kind of just like, got to feel it out.
Yeah, I always felt with mine, even though he said not to pay attention to it at all, it's kind of hard when you're doing a launch or you're doing a whole bunch of different advertising. And Brian Meeks admitted that it takes much better tracking to figure out which thing is moving the dial, since it's not like you can use your affiliate link on everything.
Yeah.
But I forgot what I was going to say. So it was probably going to be smart and witty, and I apologize to people for not getting to hear it. But as far as keywords go, are you just keeping the same ad and adding, like, are these author names that you're picking?
Well, actually, I am not really sure what the etiquette is with author names, because I'm new to the scene, but I've heard that some authors don't like it when you use their name as a target. So everyone who has said that I know of, I don't do that. But yeah, sometimes I'll use author names as targets. More often it's titles of books, because across authors, they don't all write the type of books I want to target. So I'll just pick out the ones that I want. But yeah, in terms of how many ads, I have to have multiple ads, because I test a lot of keywords and I end up exhausting I think it's 1,000 keyword limit. So I think at this point I have about 10 AMS ads going.
That's a really good point about authors. Sometimes, like if somebody like me, I can't speak today. I don't know why speaking is hard, but what's new? But if they write sci-fi and fantasy, you wouldn't want your epic fantasy showing up on my sci-fi books.
Mm-hmm.
Although I've never thought one way or the other. I'll target authors, and you're fair game. If your book is not holding their attention and they click my ad, that's not my fault. And I figure it goes the same way. If my book isn't quite to their taste, and if I didn't do a good enough job with the blurb and the cover, then maybe that ad deserved to be clicked. All right, last question on that for me. You mentioned Facebook too, and I found that one can be tough, since the people aren't necessarily there looking for books. On BookBub and Amazon, you have a pretty good idea that they're already shopping for books or interested in getting deals on books. And the Facebook crowd can be maybe a little tougher to convert. Like, you can get the clicks, I find, but they might not convert to sales as often. Do you have any tips or what you've discovered there?
Oh, yes. I've done a lot of Facebook ads and seen them go in flames. But my best ones have been snippets that I determine are the most eye-catching. So it's got to be something that will capture them in like the first few lines, because you want them to keep reading and you want them to click. So if you have a really hooky passage from your book, I feel like that works really well. And of course, really eye-catching graphics. I used Michael Cooper's Help My Facebook Ads Suck to kind of guide what graphics I should use. But yeah, snippets of me for me have worked the best. I've tried writing copy and it doesn't work. For whatever reason, I can't write anything compelling for Facebook ads, but yeah, just the excerpts, I guess.
I feel like that's a common refrain with authors. It's like, oh, I can write a 200,000 word book, but you need me to write 150 compelling words for an ad? Like it's that in blurbs. It's like the shorter it goes, the harder it is. That's why Twitter might be a good training tool. But all right, so one question I have is, you mentioned having different types of graphics. I've also I picked up the Help My Facebook Ads Suck book, and he specifically references using like stock photo type stuff, like not even something specific to your book. And you said that you got some graphics for ads. Did you get custom graphics or just stock photo type stuff?
Well, actually for Facebook, what I ended up doing was, because I'm targeting women, I wanted to say that it might have been his book, it might have been another book that said women respond best to faces. So I ended up going with that and using, well, I had illustrations done for all my covers. So I know he said don't use your cover, but I just used no graphics, no text. And so I just zoomed in on the people, and those ended up doing really well. One of my writing group partners, she used stock photos and has had really great success with them. So I think it's both.
That's good to know, because I also ran, when I was doing my Facebook ad tests, I have illustrated covers and I did exactly the same thing. However,
Yep.
I didn't use a snippet, so maybe I could have improved a little bit there. Now you're running ads constantly. Where are you directing the ads? Are you going to the most recently released book or to the beginning of a series?
Well, for the series books, I just do the first book in the series, but I use graphics from all the covers for that one book. So I'll just use various snippets from that one. And then for the standalone that's in the box set, yeah, snippet from that. And then we each got individual covers for our books in the box set, and we used those for our ad graphics.
And you mentioned that you try to keep a new book coming out once every 3 months or so. Do you find that there's a point of diminishing returns on any given thing that you're advertising, or do ads continue to pay dividends just sort of as long as you keep the ad fresh?
Well, yeah, I think that's the key, as long as you keep the ad fresh, because if you just leave it with the one audience for months and months and months, then yeah, I feel like it's going to get stale. You're kind of going to exhaust people. So I tried to mix it up. So I mentioned some series adjacent genres. That's what I play around with. So I'll use the fairy tale audience, epic fantasy, I'll use some paranormal romance, and kind of just move around in those.
Have you ever considered relaunching a title? Like, for instance, if the sales drops a little bit, changing the cover, a blurb, keywords, categories, that sort of thing?
Well, so far since November, they've been doing okay. So I haven't considered relaunching any of those, but in terms of what I do I would consider it, because sometimes you might just get it wrong. You might think that this is what your target audience wants, and then you get some reviews and, oh no, that's not what the cover was advertising. So yeah, sometimes you might just need to relaunch.
Okay, yeah, because I've considered, I've got a couple of my fantasies that are going a little bit slow, thinking, okay, we've heard of people that that redo the covers, redo the blurs, but I know that can just get expensive, especially if you do everything professionally. So I was just wondering, I know your books are doing well. I was wondering, and you answered the question for me, would you consider doing it? If the situation arose.
Yeah, because I think just the cover, yeah, it can get expensive, but for the price you pay, you might make a lot of money off of that if you get it right. And and besides that, it's just like fresh, it's in your face. So people who might have passed it by before might give it a relook if you're hitting what they're looking for.
All right, well, speaking of covers, I have to say that, and I told you this, I think that before I ever saw you on Facebook or around the Facebook groups, I remember seeing your book in the top 100 epic fantasy, and I was like, that is a cool cover, and I've told you that I'd like to steal your cover artist and may send her an email here shortly. But what did you get exactly what you want? What were you planning when you went searching for a cover artist?
Well, I knew I definitely wanted illustrated because that's what my target audience reads. So that just was already set in stone for me. But I also wanted to make sure that I am broadcasting the elements of my book so that the right readers are getting matched up with it. So it's really, it's epic fantasy. So I definitely wanted some cool magic stuff on there. but also romantic. So I had kind of like a little, like a rose, sort of like a more pretty styled heroine. And each of the covers has an element of epic fantasy and one of those series adjacent genres.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because I didn't think about it until later that like Blade and the Rose sounds sort of like a 70s romance novel title. The Rose and the Rapier, is that one? That sounds like something on my mom's bookshelf. But I didn't even think about it. I just was like, oh, cool, mage on the front throwing a fireball or whatever she's doing.
Yeah.
But it is nice that you got the Rose, and it does hint of elements of romance for people who are less obtuse than I am. And are actually looking for that kind of thing, which I enjoy. So I have bought it. I haven't read it yet. So
it is very long.
I know, that's what gets me. I'm like, oh, 700 odd pages. I don't know. That's a commitment right there. But fortunately, readers are so much like less stressed for, like, all my reading time that I used to do is writing time now. So I almost exclusively am just beta reading for fellow authors or listening to audiobooks. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's a commitment to sit down with an actual book.
Same here. Like almost all the books I read are my writing groups, and then audiobooks just doing chores.
All right. So you were saying earlier you're big into numbers and how you have been keeping track of, for example, everyone who comes into your list, how they got into your list. And on the subject of series adjacent audiences, are you trying to keep track of how they came in, and like with your advertising and with your newsletter, trying to make sure that people came in via sci-fi or getting the more, not sci-fi, like via romance or getting more of the romance stuff, and people came in via, say, fairy tales or getting more fairy tale stuff?
I would love to do that, but I haven't yet done ads for my reader magnet. But if I were to do ads for my reader magnet, that's exactly what I would do. I would track signups based on when I'm using which audience.
Yeah, it seems like, and this is a big thing where, like, I want to use the term min-maxing. Like, there's so many tools and there's so many things you can do. It seems like the best thing you can do is what you're doing, where you find out exactly what is working and how, and making sure that the most effective version of anything is being used. So I admire and praise your dedication to being able to actually do that stuff, because I used to do it way back in the beginning, particularly with tracking the value of different promotions. And then I stopped doing it, oddly, as I got more time to write. It's like as I moved away from my day job and into being a full-time writer, I stopped paying attention to the numbers and started paying attention to the words again.
All right, so I need to ask, you already mentioned that you use Facebook and Twitter. Do you use any other social networking platforms?
I actually am really bad at social media. I'm trying to get better, but from what my readers have told me, and I want to say a big thank you to Shelby and Mary for educating me, Instagram is where it's at for my kind of books. So that is what I'm learning right now. I use Facebook begrudgingly. Twitter is just, it's too hard, but I try. Pinterest.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
You should laugh because it's pathetic. I should be able to.
At least you use it. I refuse to touch it with a 10-foot pole.
I was just about to say do Twitter, so I think we're in the same boat here.
So how often do you post on Facebook, or in this case, how often do you tweet, I guess would be the terminology?
Well, with Twitter, I'm a little more liberal, and I will have probably a few tweets a week with things like sales and talking about other books and just that sort of thing, retweets. But with Facebook, it's usually just when I have something. So it's kind of like, oh, I am writing the first chapter of the new book, and then I'll put that up and link it to my newsletter. Or I had a poll there recently. Readers really loved it. So yeah, just more sporadic on Facebook, but I probably should be better about that.
Okay, you mentioned Instagram. I gotta ask. I was actually signed up for an Instagram account a long time ago. I haven't done too much with it. I'm curious to hear. You said that's where your readers are at. How do you use it to help you out? What do you do?
Well, I haven't dived in yet. I should have, but like I said, I need to educate myself fully before I go into anything. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm reading all up on Instagram for authors and what I need to do. But from what I understand, it's going to be a lot of taking photos and hashtags.
Yeah, it's predominantly photos, and because what I've experienced with it, because the only thing I really do is I post like a picture of my book, then I'll hashtag my name, and then maybe like indie author. I mean, there's a couple of things that pertain to it, and then I just kind of sit back, and some people like it or whatnot, and like I'm like, okay, well, I'm not really sure how this is supposed to help me here, but okay, well, supposedly this works for some people here, so I'm still trying to find someone that is making it work for them as well. So when you said you use it, I'm like, aha, let's see what she's doing.
Well, the one thing that I am certain of with it is that you want to use it genuinely. So I think, at least my experience with following a lot of authors on Twitter was that I would get the instant DM of, buy my book, here's a link. Yeah, that's an instant unfollow. I think if you're on a social media platform, then you have to find what you're interested in and get involved with that so that people see you're a real person with real interests and not just there to make money off of that.
Yeah, that's good to mention that, because that's one thing I have a Facebook account as well, but I do not push my book like crazy. Instead, I like to say, like, okay, what can I do to get some interaction with the readers? Okay, saw the latest Star Wars. It sucked, and I just got blasted by a lot of people that agreed, a lot of people that didn't. But yeah, just a matter of finding out, what interest you share with the readers.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Lindsay, short notice.
I was giving updates in the chat about all the noises my dogs are making, so I was like, keep talking, Jeff, you're good, keep going. One is coughing up a hairball. I don't even know what she's been doing.
A dog is coughing up a hairball?
Yeah, well, she's coughing up something. I find it later. Okay, but yeah, I'm curious too about the Instagram thing, so you'll have to update us at some future date if you unlock the secrets of Instagram. You have to post pictures, right? Are you doing cover art or what
Not
else?
only that, but,
that?
but apparently it's phone pictures. So I was like, okay, how can I do this for my computer? I have a picture. And then I found out I am apparently like a grandma because you're supposed to be using your phone for this. So
well, yeah, all I can think of now is like taking my book out into the nature, like here's my book in front of a pond, in front of a cactus. But I feel like we'll have to find somebody to come on the show that's really doing well with it. I've mostly heard like kind of the YA audience. You definitely would want to be on there. But it's interesting that you say epic fantasy romance. Maybe everybody under 30 or 40 is now under there and is on there, and I just don't know it yet.
Well, I would love to watch that show. If you get an Instagram expert, I will be taking notes.
All right, and they have to convert to sales. Just because you have a lot of followers or whatever. We're not impressed until they're buying books. All right, well, wrapping up here, I want to talk a little bit about, you decided to go into KU, into Amazon exclusivity to start with. Mm-hmm. I think that was a good idea, but what were you deciding that's just kind of the best way right now as a new author?
Well, when I was debuting, my thought was it would probably give me the best return on investment because I would be putting all my eggs in one basket and hoping to make a really big impact versus spreading them and making a mediocre impact maybe on most and diluting the Amazon impact. So I figured if I make a big enough splash, then eventually it'll be easier for me to go wide. I'll have the resources to do that. People might be aware of me. It'll be easier. But also there's the built-in audience. If you are selling your book to people in KU, there's no barrier for them to read it. And as it turns out, an 800-page book is apparently a good value because I get that from time to time. Like, this is a great value. Okay then. So I guess that works out.
There's the two types of readers in the world. There's the people who are like, yes, it's long. Yeah. And then there's like, oh, I've had bad experiences with the long books. I'm a little afraid.
Yeah, well, apparently they liked that, so great. I get more money on a full KU borrow than I do on a sale, so please keep on borrowing my book.
Yes, and reading it to the end, hopefully.
Yeah.
I am curious about that. Do you pay attention every now and then on Kboard? Somebody's like talking about, we need to stop scammers by lowering the cap or something like that. Are you concerned that could happen and affect things for you, or just not worrying about it now?
I try not to worry about it too much because I think that there will always be drama about certain things, and I would just rather spend the time writing. But speaking to lowering the cap, I think that would be really unfortunate for epic fantasy authors because our readers love long books. A lot of the time they won't like it if you just cut it off mid-sentence at 1,000 can be. So I don't want to see that happen. But also I feel like everything is already in place in terms of regulations. Like, we know these scammers are acting against the rules. It's a matter of enforcement. So if Amazon could please put the manpower there to take care of that, I think we wouldn't need to change any rules, just get more people on it.
And to play devil's advocate, do you ever feel like making more from a borrow than you do from a sale might be something that rubs people the wrong way? I'm not rubbed the wrong way, but I kind of think that eventually it'll go the way of Spotify, and we won't get paid nearly as much for our books.
Well, I don't, and that's because if we're talking about word count here, right? So if I have like 1,500 KenP or whatever, then that could just be multiple books of someone else's. It takes me as long probably as someone else to write as many books. I could have divided mine into 3 and made the same money, but you know, it's just one book. So I don't feel like it's gaming the system or anything. It's just you're putting it into one book instead of spreading it over 3.
All right. Now you said that like you felt like KU is a good way to start and get you ready for wide. Are you still thinking of going wide, or is KU like okay, good?
Yeah, I definitely do want to go wide.
And you, from what I've heard, you do a lot of work and make sure that you are ready when the time comes. Like, what sort of prep are you putting together for your eventual wide experimentation?
Well, I'm definitely taking notes on you know, where readers are. So I'll get readers to tell me like, I want to read this on Kobo. Like actually the Kobo people are like really vocal about wanting to read it on Kobo. So I do pay attention to that. But otherwise I plan my schedule as much as I can. So I look at my release schedule and kind of think of where would be a good break point where I could transition to wide. And I don't want to upset KU readers. So I think it maybe won't be with this particular series that I've launched wide, but next series I'm definitely thinking about it.
Oh, that was going to be my sort of follow-up is like, when will you know when the time is right to start your wide?
I've decided about 5 books in probably. So what I might end up doing is just do a KU period on books 5 and 6, and then end up taking it wide after a few months.
So my final question I always like asking people, if you're ever given the opportunity, what would you say to your former self on the verge of releasing your first title? Would you do anything different?
Oh man, that is tough. Don't abuse your body. That's what I would tell my former self.
I think some context might be required here.
Well, because I am a workaholic. If you leave me to work, I will just work until I literally cannot. And that is what happened with book 3. So when you're your own boss, you have to regulate your breaks and tell yourself, no, this is as long as you get to work today. Now you rest. And when stuff starts hurting, you stop.
That's a good way to look at it, I suppose.
Yeah.
I have to say, I've found that the Kobo people are also kind of vocal about why aren't you on our platform? And I've decided it's because they have the Kobo Aura, which is waterproof.
Ooh.
Where else would you read a 700-page epic fantasy but the bathtub or the hot tub? So
what, if you fall asleep and it dips in? Then
you're cool. You can drop it.
No.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh no.
All right. There's our Kobo plug, and they're not even a sponsor of the show, but they're good peeps. So happy to talk about them. And that is it for me, though. Do you want to kind of remind us the name of your book, first book, and what you're working on now? I think you said August would be the next one.
Right. Well, my series that I have out, the romantic epic fantasy, is called Blade and Rose, and book 4 is coming out in August. And then the Beauty and the Beast box set that my writing group and I released last month, that's Of Beasts and Beauties.
All right, cool. I will put the links in the show notes. This is episode 181. I'll also link to your website in case people want to come by.
Thank
and
you.
That's about it on here. Come on by and leave a comment if you guys want. If you want to know what King Sumo was, I'll try to find a link for that and put that in there too. But that's it from us. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, Miranda.
Thank you for having me.
Nice to meet you, Miranda. Thanks for hanging out with us.
Nice to meet you.
So long, everybody.